Clock says it's 7 o'clock. So I'd like to bring the March 11th, 2025 Planning Board meeting to order. Karen?
Claudia Bogan. Here. Jim Callahan.
Here.
Dave Edmonds.
Here.
Rob Klein.
Here.
Kevin Donovan, absent. Carolyn Turner. Here. Chair Bob Doherty.
Here. First item up is under public hearings. This was opened on January 14th, continued to February 11th, and now continued to today. Under the provisions of the Woburn zoning ordinance of the Mass General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 5, this public hearing is for the petition by Gustavino Realty LLC, the owner of 660 Main Street, Woburn, Mass., as well as the owners of the parcels listed below that are included in this rezoning petition, which calls to amend the 1985 zoning ordinances as amended by A, adopting a new zoning overlay district, section to be determined, entitled Central Square Overlay District. As shown on the city's assessors map, the parcels include in this rezoning petition 654 Main Street, 36-09-31, 658 Main Street, 36-3-01, 662 Main Street, 33-3-02, 664 Main Street, 36-3-04, 668 Main Street, 36-03-04, 670 Main Street, 33-3-05, 2 Lowell Street, 36-3-06, 4 Lowell Street, 36-3-07, 10 Lowell Street, 36-03-08, 12 Lowell Street, 35-11-06, 14 Lowell Street, 35-11-07, and 16 Lowell Street, 35-11-08, and 660 Main Street, 35-11-05. And now we'll take a quick recess as I get my breath. I'm done talking for the night.
Okay.
Mr. Tao.
Right, okay, thank you. For the record, Joseph Tabby, I'm an attorney with the law firm of Rubin and Rudman, 500 Unicorn Park Drive in Woburn. So this evening, what we plan to do is to clarify and comment on the planning director's markup of the proposed zoning ordinance. And then we have the complete team here tonight that can answer any open questions that you may have. So if we start with the first page, second page is mostly cleaning up and changing the section numbers and eliminating duplicative language. When you go to the third page under uses, one suggested change that we're proposing is under uses allowed by right with site plan review is limited now to three uses. 1, rooftop solar. 2, accessory uses that are incidental to a permitted use. And 3, a freestanding ATM. Since roof-mounted solar and all the other categories are allowed by right throughout the zoning districts, we're going to propose that 1 be entitled uses allowed by right and eliminate the need for site plan review to put rooftop solar. In number 2, what we're going to propose is we're going to propose to combine items 1, 2, and 3. And how that would read generally is as follows. First of all, we're now proposing a total number of residential units of 195 units, 195 units, of which a maximum of 170 units would be constructed off of Main Street, meaning behind the proposed townhouses on Main Street. And those units could be congregate elderly housing, garden or elevator apartments, or additional townhouse units. And the remainder of the units between what gets built off of Main Street and along Main Street would be townhouses. So we're looking at roughly 24 to 32 townhouses along Main Street, and then the remainder of the 195 units in two buildings off of Main Street. And then to address what has been expressed to us as a concern about school impact is that we're proposing sort of a hybrid of affordable housing, so that the townhouses along Main Street, which some of them may have up to 3 bedrooms, we would propose that those units not provide any affordable units. All the other residential units that are constructed off of Main Street shall provide affordable units as follows. So any of the units that are for rent, residential units would provide 15% of those units as affordable. And anything that becomes of sale, we would propose that 10% of those units be affordable. So when you look at all the possibilities, the total number of affordable units will be in excess of 10%, probably close to like 12.5%. So that's one change that we're proposing to the markup that John had included as part of his packet. So on the next page, on 4, we continue to believe that the height of the building should include the parking facilities as allowed under Section 2 of the Woburn zoning ordinance. Paragraph 2 and 3, we've followed the same approach that was done with the overlay districts for the L-Bod and the T-Bod. The L-Bod being at the Showcase Cinema site and the T-Bod being at the Vale site. So that when you have an overlay district, you know, the concern of the setbacks from the perimeter of the outline of the districts and would not apply to buildings inside the district. So the setbacks would apply only to the perimeter of the zoning district. That was language that was approved in both the T-Bod and the L-Bod. And there was a question about frontage of any contiguous or non-contiguous parcel within the district. Again, that's similar to what was done with the Vale. So as long as you could make up 100 feet of frontage along the whole perimeter of the overlay, that would qualify for minimum street frontage of 100 feet. There was also a note about looking at the proposed 40% maximum building coverage and the minimum landscape open space of 25%. We took those numbers from the last overlay district to be approved by the city council, that being the railway overlay district, which is, as you know, as you're heading up Green Street, the property to the left. The allowance for maximum building ground coverage was 40%, and the landscape open space was 25%. And we've proposed the same for this overlay district. And then in terms of the height, we're not proposing any revisions to the height. The maximum height under the S1 is 35 feet. John has asked in his comment there. And then number 6 talks about the number of units, which I've just indicated we've proposed to reduce from 225 to 195 units. And also on the parking, we've taken John's comment, and we've agreed that we would change it from 2 spaces for every 1,000 square feet of net floor area for non-residential uses to whatever is required for whatever non-residential use is set forth in Section 8. So if it's office, it would be 1 per 350. If it's medical, it would be whatever's required for medical and so on and so forth. And then we're also proposing an additional paragraph, two additional paragraphs to off-site parking. One, in that particular section. Okay, one would allow for EV stations to be installed. And then the other one would mirror language in Section 8 of this zoning ordinance that would allow for the applicant to seek off-site parking as long as it's within 500 feet of the principal use and there's evidence of long-term control or leasing of the property. And the property most likely, if in fact it's needed, would be the Boys and Girls Club property. Comes a win-win for both the city developer and Boys and Girls Club in that there's additional off-street parking if there's a concern that there's not enough parking on site. And two, Boys and Girls Clubs get a stream of revenue. So those are our comments to Mr. Cashel's comments. As I said, we have the entire team here. We have our traffic engineer, site engineer, Mr. Carbone, Mr. Tocci, and we are available to answer any open questions that you have.
Thank you. Okay, anybody from the board like to make a comment, ask questions? Please feel free to raise your hand. Jim?
Start off with the frontage on Central Square abutting the green. There was 2 units, 2 houses that were not acquired as of the last meeting. Has there been any change on that front?
I don't believe there's been any closing. No, not yet, no.
So currently you're proposing, I believe it's 10-foot setback on the frontage for the townhouses, and you're interrupted by 2 houses that have some 20-foot setback currently, I believe. I don't see that playing into the neighborhood very wisely. If you did have continuous ownership of it, I'd look upon it differently. But I don't see that being a wise choice. And the second component on the townhouses is, what is the need for a 3-story and 39-foot height to accomplish building 3 stories?
Just given the
I'd like to have an
topography.
expert
I'm sorry?
reply to this. I'd like to have an expert reply to this,
Have an expert.
please. Why you need 13 feet per floor?
No, first of all, you're building into a grade. I don't, Nick, can you address this
Please.
on the height?
I believe the question is about floor-to-floor height. I can speak to the
Excuse me.
grades around the
Please
site.
address it from
Please
the
come up.
podium.
Yeah. State your name, please.
Yeah, for the record, Nick Delacava with Allen & Major Associates. I believe, is your question about the floor-to-floor heights of the building?
No, sir. My question is, from grade, which is at Main Street, which is governed by the building code, right, to determine your mean elevation. You're calling for 39 feet versus 35 feet, which is currently allowed. Why do you need somewhere in the range of 13 feet per floor to build a condo of what, 40 feet in width? Trying to understand this concept. Because 12 feet floor to floor for a commercial building is more than enough, never mind a residential.
So if the board so allows, I'll speak to this. I'm a degreed engineer, and I've been in construction for 52
state
years and
name,
built
please.
about 15
Excuse me,
million square
please
feet.
state name, please.
I'm John Tocci from Tocci Building Corporation. The height is measured to the mean height of the roof. The floor-to-floor heights are 11.5 feet, typically in wood frame construction with joist construction, and you add it up, and you come to 39 to 40 feet for mid-height of between the eave and the ridge.
Floor-to-floor heights of 11.5 feet,
That's correct.
with a net ceiling height of what?
Net ceiling height will be 9'0".
9 foot. It's quite a bit of interstitial space for, 8 to 10 inch ductwork at max, going below floor joists, which is usually your main component.
We
So
use,
I think,
we
I
use
think
open
we're-
web, we use open web
Okay.
joists, and we go through it. So we
I
go
heard your answer.
24-inch joists.
All right, so that's my questions on the townhouses. Second one is, the height of the buildings for the, two individual freestanding, calling for 65 feet and 5 stories, again. Same question. Floor-to-floor heights, I don't agree if you're gonna follow that response that you had for the residential. I have to tell you, I differ right up front, greatly. But, and,
Okay?
yes, I have the same background.
So the 5-story podium or non-podium construction is 11 foot 3 inches floor to floor with an 18 to 20 inch open web joist. And you have a 2-foot parapet typically at the roof, even on a flat roof. If you put a mansard on it, it's going to add another 6 feet to it.
Next question I have is, there been any movement in regards to the lot line that abuts the Middlesex Canal? We discussed it, currently you go up to the edge of the water line, is what was depicted on the west side of the lot.
No,
I don't understand what
The
it's.
red line is the property.
That's the property line, that's not the building line.
Well, we discussed this at the last meeting, it was the water line, the last time, on the eastbound side of the canal, and I asked the question why it would be encompassing the Middlesex Canal path, which is currently a bike overlay path. Why they were,
We
that,
don't recall
that's,
that question, number one. Number two, that's the property line. This is the
Okay.
plan we submitted with the petition. The property line hasn't changed, the plan hasn't changed. That's the property line.
not disagreeing, it's not the proper line, Joe. That's not what was conveyed in the last meeting, that's why I asked the question.
Respectfully disagree.
Okay? That's all I have for question this time.
Okay. Anyone else? Dave?
So you've reduced by 30 units. What's the number of, how many bedrooms were there before when you had 225 units? And how many bedrooms do you have now that you have 195 units?
John, Peter, do you have the breakdown of the? We just got.
For the record, Peter Carboni. If I understand your question correctly, the 30-unit reduction probably equates to about 40 bedrooms. They're usually about, you're going to have probably 2/3 2 beds, 1/3 1 bedrooms. So if you do the math, it's probably about 40 bedrooms, I would say.
So the reduction in number of units, you didn't offset by adding more bedrooms to other units?
No.
So it's a straight reduction?
Correct, right. And to clarify one thing on this, if you take between 24 and 32 units out front of the townhomes, which are going to replace 17 to 20 apartments or units today, with driveways out on the street, those driveways are all getting eliminated, you end up with somewhere between 165 and 168, most likely, units out back. And a lot of times we've been comparing this product to Place Lane, which is 147. So to me, the real comparison or what should be considered is what's the number of units that are going to be in the back here? The front, to me, it's not quite a one-to-one offset, but what they're going to look like compared to what they look like today as a resident even, I would take that change all day long. So we're getting much closer to the Place Lane kind of number of unit, and densities that are out back.
Now, concerning parking, there is obviously fewer parking spots with fewer units,
Yeah.
but you were talking about additional leased units 500 feet from, if I got this right? So how many actual parking spaces will there be right there at the development? And how many are you projecting would be at this leased space?
Okay, so right now, we'll have about 282 to 285 spaces on the ground and in the garage structure. That's what we have right now. As we do some further engineering, we may end up with a little bit more than that, which we would note at the special permit phase. If we end up, we will likely go over the 1:5 ratio. Where we end up, we don't know exactly, but we'll likely be higher than the 1:5 ratio. That's the minimum. We could add, based on rough work that we've done with the Boys and Girls Clubs, the conversations anyway, we add between 30 and 45 more spaces if we need that land and if we can strike a suitable arrangement with the club. So to the extent we need more parking, we don't have an arrangement finalized. We would deal with this at the special permit phase, but we could probably add another, average, say, 40 spaces
So
of off-site.
Wouldn't 1.5 on 195 units be about 270?
So what you have to back out, yep, but what you have to back out is all the units on the street have their own parking in their garages. So take those out. So in theory, my number is probably too low. When I quoted the 282, it's the parking available for the buildings in the back. The parking out front is all gonna be solved in their garages. So the math that you just did, you have to use, say, 160 units. We have about 282 spaces for between 160 and 170 spaces, units, I'm sorry. So you did the math right, but if you take out the townhouse units, those are parked on their own.
All right, and you're saying that 500-foot thing is the Boys and Girls Club parking lot?
That's what it's written for. Yeah, yeah.
Why didn't you just say that?
I think it's just the flexibility in the zoning that if we needed some off-street parking. I think Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there may be a provision that already allows some places to have off-street up to 500 feet away. So I think we just mimicked that.
On this map, where would 500 feet take you? Are you talking 500 feet all
I
the way
think-
around?
Well, yeah,
This is a heavy
500 feet
residential area.
would take you clearly off this map. I think we could probably be okay to reduce that number. I don't see a reason that we couldn't reduce that to, we could reduce it to 100 feet I'd want to make sure that the whole area that we may do something with the Boys Club is at least 100 feet wide. But yeah, it could be less than that, sure.
It's just that I've been on the board 21 years,
Yeah.
and sometimes the math seems okay until you actually get into the neighborhood, and then the neighbors find out what they bought wasn't really what they thought they were getting.
Understood.
And when you're talking about going, 500 feet is a long time, a good distance.
Yeah.
And I hate to think you're shooting out 500 feet and you find, or you decide to buy a property.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the neighbors have a parking lot next
Yeah.
to their house. And I would not like to see that happen.
Good comment, appreciate the comment. I think we can reduce that down. Why don't I, between now and when we get to the council, unless you want us to propose a number now, we can definitely reduce it from the 500. So, I don't know if we
All set? Anyone else? Jim?
The area that you're in discussions with the Boys Club, where is that located?
So, it is on this map at the extreme bottom. It would basically be, you're pretty familiar with the club. So, you know where the two, when you come down the back where the basketball courts are, you can just see the top of the children's play areas here. It would likely go along that edge, and if we were gonna do it, we'd relocate the play area to probably the other side of the courts, so that you still have the courts, you still do the kids thing, but it would basically be like a strip along that edge. It's not very large, to be honest
So
with
if that was the case, would you push the berm back that separates the two property lines?
you. Yeah, we would probably
Separation?
we would probably have to get rid of that and landscape it with, whether we're doing, I think my family actually created that berm when we bought this. It's a number of years ago. It's mostly just a gravel pile,
Right.
but it does provide shielding.
Sure.
So we will come up with a landscape plan appropriate for the club and the city, to the extent we end up doing anything there.
So the reason why I asked the question is pretty much a follow-up to what Dave asked.
Yeah,
So if you need that overflow parking,
yep,
and it's contiguous of the tract of land that you have, or appears to be, and separated with a similar type berm, or some type of landscape that you have there currently, you eliminate the concerns of the neighbors. You're not dealing with headlights and horns and such because it's diffused.
yeah.
And I think the concept is right on the money if you need it. I would
Yep.
think that's something you need there.
We can also look at additional landscaping even around that corner when we get to a landscape plan with something that's not as deciduous, whether there's Christmas tree types or
Understood.
arborvitaes or something in there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All set? Just a question, do we have anything in writing that they sent in about the 500 feet or the?
No, but what I was gonna suggest in this conversation, during the special permit process, they'd probably want to formally establish a cross-parking easement with the Boys Club in a formal manner. So that's what I recommend at that stage. That would be in the special permit aspect.
So so if we say we send a positive recommendation to the, whatever, to the council, there's nothing to do with the 500 feet, 100 feet, the Boys Club parking or anything like that, right?
The zoning ordinance already allows for cross easements for parking purposes.
Correct.
And, here we're talking about an immediate abutter. So it falls within the language that already exists. What they're gonna want to do ultimately with this zoning ordinance is to include language allowing for that specific to this ordinance, this overlay district.
I believe that's what Joe was referring to earlier today that we put in, but we wouldn't come back and show, when we come back for a special, if this gets approved, we wouldn't come back for a special permit and show anything on anybody else's land, Boys Club or otherwise, unless we have a written agreement done with the club. And they submit to us to include in their land with the filing.
And I guess, Mr. Chairman, as well, if it's the desire of the board to send their recommendation to the council and ask them to look at the 500 feet, as Peter indicated, we're going to look at that and see exactly how many feet we need in order to provide that extra parking. That's one way to address your concern.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So the one question I have, because this is coming up for the first time this evening. This extra parking need is for events that may take place on the property, or is this going to
Not-
be a permanent, you're gonna need these spaces?
There's a practical debate going on in terms of what is the right number of parking spaces for a suburban project like this, where there's some public transportation available, but how many spaces do we need? And then you have visitor, and then you have the building. So I think it's a combination that we want. With all due respect to the mall, we don't end up with a situation like we have down there where, forget about the Avalon project and the impacts on that, but I just don't think there's enough parking myself. So we don't want to end up in that situation here. So when we ultimately come back, the number of units is going to be tied in large part to how much parking we have and how can we make that work. So does that answer your question, Joe?
I mean, the one thing you really should be working on is, and you're working towards that already, I guess, based on the comments that you received at the last meeting.
Yeah.
You really have to accommodate your parking needs in accordance with the zoning ordinance for the density you're proposing.
Yeah.
Because nobody really wants to see your parking needs spreading out all over the neighborhood.
Totally. Yep, which is why I think we'll exceed them. If I go back to one thing, Mr. Callahan, if I can go back to one thing just to clarify as well, on the building heights for the townhouses, John, just to further on what John said, we also have to take into account that like 25% of the buildings out front are actually going to be 4 stories from the back.
Correct, I
So
understand that.
when it drops down, that calculation has to, so even though you have 33 feet in the
Main
front,
entrance
yeah, so
by the building code.
it adds to the calculation. So it's not just 11 times 3, so, anyway.
So, just to clarify it, the city can't require you to have more parking spaces than what zoning calls for per use. But it really should be working towards accommodating the required number of spaces on your property.
I feel pretty safe to say we're gonna exceed it. You'll know the number when we come back here the next time.
Somebody's always having an event, party, people
Yep.
over.
Yep.
So you do need guest parking.
Yeah, yeah.
A certain amount.
I also don't think we're much, big fans of off-site parking. Rob?
Are these, the spaces you referenced, the number of spaces, is that inclusive of the existing parking now for the existing commercial building? Or are these all net new, or?
No, these would be, there's a the number I quoted is a total net, the total new spaces. Back up. There's some spaces on the other side of the existing building right now, if you've been over there where we all park. That gets rejiggered a little bit, so that pavement likely ends up there, or some of it, but it gets restriped in this net. So consider that 282 are really new spaces on this entire property, excluding the townhouses. And we need to make sure we're comfortable with that, with what we may need for the building itself. So that's what that's why the unit counts here may fluctuate, potentially more down than up, to make sure we have enough parking for that. There is a concept in the bylaw to allow this sort of cross-parking, like during the day when residents aren't there. The issue we may have is if we do more condo and for sale, you're gonna have deeded spaces, so it's not like I can just give those to an office user during the day. So if we go apartment, there may be more space available during the day. If we go condo, maybe not.
Right.
So it's gonna fluctuate how many space we actually need. So we'll tighten that up as part of the special permit.
Okay.
Anything else, Jim?
Are there any other six-story developments in Ward 4 that are existing?
Residential? Anything at all?
Residential's not allowed that height.
I have to profess, I think I live in Ward 4, but I'm not sure the exact limits on it, but I'd have to think about it. Like some of the Cummings buildings are probably 6 or 7, but I don't know if that's in
Maybe
that,
Ward 5,
in that zone.
You asked Ward 6?
Ward 4.
Oh, Ward 4.
I can't think of anything.
Nor can I. I took a ride around
Yeah.
Ward and having grown up there like yourself,
Yeah.
quite familiar with the properties. The council referenced two overlay districts, one on the old gelatin site and the other one at the cinemas. Both have interstate frontage. Keep that in mind, they're away from the public and set back from the main thoroughfare, you know, in a lot of cases, 1,000 feet or
Yeah.
better. The component on the one in Central Square had the existing houses, which conform. Obviously, I have concerns about heights
Yep,
and density in
Yep.
this area and dwarfing the existing development. I think some of this proposal, honestly, has gotten a little bit clouded by some of the other proposals that are coming down the pike, which we cannot consider. And I just want to make sure we're just dealing with these subjects only. So those are my concerns. I think you answered everything very good. One suggestion, if you're carving out the parking spaces of the property, you probably want to identify it at the city council level, that they are not taking away from the existing parking that's paved for the Boys and Girls Club currently.
yep, yep.
Thank you.
What's that? Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you.
Seeing nothing. I was remiss in the beginning of the meeting not to mention, please silence your cell phones. And note that this meeting is being recorded. Okay, this is a public hearing. First thing I'd like to entertain is we had a email sent to us from Mr. Bob Callahan, and I'll entertain a motion to add that into the minutes as part of the public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Claudia, second by Dave. All those in favor? Okay, 6-0 carries. And now the public hearing. So, anybody would like to come up and speak in favor or against, whatever they'd like to say, please do come up. Give your name and address and sign that sheet of paper right there. And you can start at any time.
Good evening. Ken Parley, 5 Marion Street, North Woburn. I'd just make a recommendation, the parking that's existing on the street across from Jack's, maybe we consider or implement some type of timed parking during business hours, so those businesses across the street, say if there was a barber shop there or, the convenience store, we don't see a situation where people are making those spots permanent spots. I noticed that on the East Dexter development, cluster development that went down there, where you slowly see these spots on the street turn into, a daily use. So just some thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Anyone else step forward? Ever hold your peace.
Good evening. Sue Ellen Holland, 2 Strawberry Lane, Woburn. I just wanted to clarify something that's been talked about a little bit. I'm also a board member of the Boys and Girls Club. This has come up for discussion at our last board meeting. It will come up for discussion tomorrow night at our next board meeting. Nothing has been decided. The Boys and Girls Club, I've just had some people say, are they on board with this? We have not taken any position on that, so I just want to clarify that the Boys and Girls Club has not made any arrangements with Tachi. I do know a couple of board members have just spoken to different members, that are here tonight, but there is nothing that has been decided. Boys and Girls Club isn't even sure if they're going to need that kind of space down the road. So entering into a sale or a lease has not been decided. Let me take a step back from the board member and just as a citizen. I grew up in Central Square. I grew up closer to the Showcase Cinemas, so I went through all of the changes that went on there and all of the arguing and fighting. I have a couple of questions. Is there only one access way into this new development? Or are you proposing opening up over onto Lowell Street? Anybody?
There's only
Well,
one.
Go ahead, John.
There's only one proposed at this point in time.
This point in
There's
time.
discussion, there may be an emergency access
Okay,
that would have to be decided with the city council under the purview of a public hearing.
okay. And on the proposed townhouses, I know they look very pretty on their website and whatnot, and it cleans up an area that needs to be cleaned up a little bit. Those are 8 units in each of those buildings. Seems like they're awfully big buildings. They're not going to really fit in with a neighborhood. I would just ask you to keep that in mind. This is a large development, 5-story buildings down in that area, which is mostly all residential. It's going to have a big impact. And the traffic, which I've seen how much worse the traffic has gotten over the years, this is not going to help it, that's for sure. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Carol Nagel, Main Street, Woburn. I can't believe we even consider something that already has a problem with the parking. I mean, I know it's 1.5 parking spaces per unit, but, I mean, when you look at this, you're gonna look at least 400+ cars. And if already there's a problem, what are they gonna do when the kids get older and there's 3 cars per unit, 4 cars per unit? I don't feel it's been reciprocal with Boys and Girls Club over the years. I don't feel like they were allowed to use that spot. The first time I've ever seen that spot used was an event that they had this year, so I don't feel like it's ever been reciprocal. I don't understand why. I feel like the Boys and Girls Club is being strong-armed supply spaces that if there's not enough room in this spot, then they need to lower the amount of units. The amount of units are ridiculous to begin with. And one thing that's never brought up is the water issues. And if I lived on Hart Street, I'd have a problem with that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Kavicki, 18 Clinton Street. I agree with the previous speaker that the colossal number of units and cars, almost 300 cars, being added into this very small area. That's only been homes and apartments in home-like buildings. It's an amazing and concerning change. Already we see regularly the traffic building up in this area. On my street, Clinton Street, at least 3 times a day, the traffic is stopped in both directions. Clinton Street is not safe. The roads, Main Street and Clinton Street, are not wide enough for accommodating a bicyclist or a pedestrian who has to be on the road, and a car, unless the car, with the 4-foot allowance, unless the car drives into the opposing lane. Public transportation is woefully inadequate in Woburn. Now, there is a bus that goes there once an hour. Hard to believe that people who are going to be able to afford these expensive units are going to be able to spend the time taking that bus, and the bus will be further slowed down by the additional traffic. Why isn't there an access on Lowell Street? Why is the access on Main Street? Why are there so many units being added? Thank you.
Please sign the sheets.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Kuberry. I would just like to say that I don't really believe there is such a thing as a one-car household anymore. 1.5 spaces per unit is going to be inadequate, and we're going to see that spill over into our neighborhood, and there won't be parking available. A 1-bedroom is going to have a couple living in it, and they're each going to have a car. So 1.5 spaces per unit is not going to be adequate, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
My name's Pam Boris. I live at 85 Willow Street. And we have something potentially lovely there. Central Square could be quite lovely, especially if we do something with the Herald School, the Wyman School. And we also have the remnants of the very precious canal. What will the building, the process of the building do to the canal? And with the
Excuse me,
with the
please
population
direct your
density,
question.
with
Okay.
the population density there, what's to prevent it there to be a lot of littering and a lot of damage to the ecosystem there? It already needs big cleanup every year.
Thank you.
Steve Lilly, Hart Place in Woburn. Are these people going to have children that move into this place? Where the schools are, Harold Wyman is too small now. The people in our neighborhood all have signs just for people trying to pick up their kids all around the school. So where are they going to put them? I mean, I assume this development of this size is going to have children and families move in. You guys got to put schools in for something like this. Are they going to do that?
Are you asking for an
I'm
answer?
asking.
Oh, okay.
How do they address the school situation if the Harold Wyman, the newest school we have, is too small?
Yeah, no, it is addressed at some point, not necessarily in the planning board meeting, but
Okay.
because it goes from here to the city council. And the city council is the one that actually approves it or disapproves it. And I understand your question, because I would hope that when we do other projects, that between the city council and the school committee, they do talk, and, you know, like how many more kids can we take over the Harold, that type of thing. Whether they do or they don't, I don't know, but they should, if they don't.
Okay, thank you.
I was just gonna say, lucky for us, they don't have 6 and 7 and 8, 10 kids anymore.
Normally,
per family.
yes, good thing.
People have pretty much stopped that. Got smart.
It is a concern.
Endowed, 43 Wyman Street. I just want to say, why do we need an overlay district? Why don't we leave it just the way the zoning is now? A fewer number of houses or whatever it's zoned for now. It's too dense, it's not safe. With the water level, I feel bad for the canal people, because that water gets out of control sometimes now. It's going to be worse. And the bridge is blocked, so the water has no place to go. I don't think we need an overlay.
Good evening. John Heslin, 36 Clinton Street. There's a couple of things I would like to, a couple of people spoke. When I first saw this design, which was back, I think, in late June, when I had been contacted, it's a long story, but I was able to see it back in June, and then more closely in the neighborhood meeting that occurred in July. I was a skeptic of the whole thing until I saw what it looked like. The design is spectacular. It really enhances that entire area. I understand the issues with the numbers and I think people are talking about that, and I think that's great. But I think I don't know all of that. I don't understand most of those things, and the heights and the eaves, and I'm just a layman. I'm just a working class guy from, I think, a working class city. And I don't know, one of the things I like is the fact that taxes are low. And one of the things, if I'm going to demand taxes low, I can't be a no development for everything guy. So I look at this as I have to at least be open to the idea. And I became much more enamored about it when I saw what they were going to do. I hadn't been in the Tachi building since 1981 when I was there at Martin TV. So when I walked in that building, I was just blown away, just approaching what they did to that building and the improvements they make. I know whatever they put up is going to be quality. I looked on their website to see some of the things they did. It's not going to be, I think of like Kilby Street, which is 4 apartment buildings. They're only, I think, 3 or 4 stories, but it's brick buildings covered by asphalt. It's not an attractive look at all. This will transform the Central Square area that's just looking shabby. And the most important thing for me, is the expansion of Wyman Green. I know that's not here tonight, but that is what really, that itself, 10,000 square feet of increased open space at Central Square is something we should all be thrilled about. We should all be desperate to get them to do that. I understand traffic issues. My house at 36 Clinton, it's the only house on Clinton after Mishwam Road, after the four-way stop. My house is at where Beach and Clinton meet. If you're aware of the telephone pole that gets hit, that's me. So I understand traffic. We had 3 major traffic crashes at that telephone pole. The third one, the driver of a box truck decided he'd avoid the telephone pole by driving through my porch and across my entire front lawn and onto my driveway, ruining the paint job I just did, which, by the way, at my age, takes me forever, and all the landscaping I had just done in the front of the house, thousands of dollars of damage. So I understand traffic. Being that close to the four-way stop sign, I understand how traffic backs up. But the main culprits of traffic in this city is, someone had mentioned, schools. Everyone going to the schools at the same time. Everyone leaving schools at the same time. The second is the business corridors in the city. Which have businesses that generally have 9 to 5 hours. Same thing, everyone's getting there at 9, everyone's leaving at 5. And then the third is the combination of the can that gets kicked down the road that drives me insane, which is the 93-95 interchange that no one's done anything about. So everyone gets off the road to avoid that, plus we have all the GPS apps that send everyone off the road. That's where all the traffic ties up are. I've been living in that house for my entire life. I'm well aware of where this traffic's, when it's hitting and where it's coming from. And it's not coming up the street, it's not coming from the folks at Beach Street, at Continental Court. They're not all leaving the house at the same time. So I don't think that however many cars get back there, they're not all gonna be leaving at the same time. Some will be working from home, some will be working second shifts, some will be retired. It just doesn't work that way. So I think the concern about the traffic is a bit overblown. And the other part, which also isn't a part of this here tonight, is traffic. I believe there's some mitigation involved that will be part of the city council. So we'll have another time to speak on that. So people are trying to address the flow of traffic. And then the third thing, people talk about Hart Street. It was brought up at the neighborhood meeting. I know for a fact that the Tachi folks went out and did a lot of work trying to get a better viewpoint, literally walking I checked up on it because I was part of the group that asked them for the neighborhood meeting. So I checked up on it afterward because it was an issue that was brought up. And I know that they looked at it. I know there's some, I don't know the details again, all above my pay grade. But I know that's part of the mitigation. And I believe, and you guys would be able to tell us if this is true, this project would require them to have a stormwater plan of some sort. So currently there is there's nothing addressing the stormwater that falls on that property now. But if this plan goes through, it's not even a question for the special permit, it's required that they have a stormwater management plan, correct?
You are correct.
Okay, so that itself, nothing's going to solve Hart Street flooding. It's been a problem my entire life, that I can't remember a time when it wasn't. But this will not cause harm, and it may even help. And again, they may be working on mitigation issues there. I don't know the details there. So I do think that there's an opportunity with that expanded green, with the improved townhouses. I just think the look of that area is going to be spectacular when they're done. And then the numbers, the height, all that stuff, to me, I'm out on that one, because I don't really, I do think the 225 is high, and I think that the apartment buildings going down to similar to Place Lane makes sense to me. So generally, I'd like to be in favor of it, but I'm afraid that the things that I like the most about it will be somehow gone by the wayside. But we'll see where time will tell. But I did want to perhaps present a neighbor who wasn't absolutely against it all. And I do agree with Elizabeth Kavicki. I think there should be, just for traffic flow, if people who live in those residences are driving down Wyman Street, it can be residential only. Allow them to use the road that already exists, the original road to that property, to access their own parking lot. And it gets them off of Main Street, it gets them off of Eaton Ave. And it just, if it's resident only, and however you figure out how to do that, then it's not really, it's manageable to me. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
I left my glasses, so I can't see.
Just put an X. Anybody else want to make their way up?
Marie Lean, 6 Marion Avenue. First of all, I'm sorry for what this gentleman went through with the accident at the intersection. But also, he mentioned problems over which we have no control, the 93 interchange, the amount of people that use their GPS to go through Woburn when there's a backup. However, we do have control over whether we have an overlay or not. Now, the fire station and the houses which follow that are in a bit of disrepair, I think it's a wonderful plan to do something about that. However, this is a great overreach for our area, for our neighborhood. It's wrought with problems such as the water table be affected. I would hope the Conservation Commission will look into wetland issues, the density, the traffic, and the whole change in the traffic in that area. We weren't going to have much trouble with parking issues with the school, but we do. So there are things you can't predict. However, I really feel we have a chance to control what's happening, and I think we don't need a project this big. Mr. Tachi and Mr. Carbone are businessmen, so to the question why an overlay, I think the answer is obvious. I think they should take what exists, wait for the city to have the big plan, not just spot zoning, and do what they can to enhance the area, and I commend them for wanting to take care of the fire station and the blighted area. I appreciate that, but I don't appreciate the overreach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and one final thing. In the Woburn Times the night before, there were 2 pictures, aerial photos similar to this, and then there was one on the present view. And the present view had many green trees, some open spaces. It was not paved over. It wasn't densely developed. I liked that view. I'd like to keep it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Board members, discussion.
Question.
Yes,
Do we expect to resolve this tonight?
I don't know.
Because the question now is whether we close the public hearing.
Yeah, I mean, we can always discuss it, see which way we're headed. If it looks like we're headed to some conclusion tonight, close the public hearing at that point before we take any other votes. As long as we close it before we take a vote or anything, we're good.
Okay,
So, but if you want to make the motion, it's up to you.
let's talk.
Okay, let's talk. Who wants to talk first? Jim?
I'd like to bring up the topic that I brought up first. Townhouses along Main Street. Currently, there is no revised green to consider. Keep that in mind. And two of the properties interrupt the continuity of the developer's own property, which would have existing setbacks at 20 feet, plus or minus, to the current proposed at 10 feet. So if you have someone without the 10-foot setback, and that's gonna be their entrance, and you can have the sidewalk that remains and the roadway that's there with on-street parking, I look at it very differently than what they're proposing. All right, and I think that should be discussed amongst the board and come to an opinion on it, move forward for our recommendation. That's the first item I think we should discuss as a group. What everyone else's feeling is, and then we can make a recommendation to the city council. We feel we've resolved it. So, that's.
Yeah? Dave?
I don't think the parking works. I mean, the more I look at it when they're talking about, well, maybe we have this place, it's 500 feet, it's 100 feet, maybe we have space next to the Boys and Girls Club. Maybe we don't, Boys and Girls Club doesn't seem to think they've made a decision on this. So if the Boys and Girls Club says, no, this is our parking lot, and we expect that we're gonna do something else somewhere down the line, because they're always doing something new, right? Where does that leave us? And the person who spoke about, there's no such thing as one-car residence unless there's just one person living in it, and even then, sometimes they have a second car. And if there's 3 bedrooms and there's 2 kids, and the kids are 18 years old, they're gonna have a car, and this just looks like it could be a real problem for the residents of the neighborhood. That's always my concern. I mean, I am clearly, we're here to look at the business of people coming in and developing. But I always feel like our first responsibility is the people who live in the neighborhood, because they're the ones who are gonna be there when all that 5 o'clock traffic goes, wherever it goes. They're still sitting there, they're still trying to, find out, I mean, I know this is, I grew up in Cambridge and lived in Somerville, and finding a parking spot is like, you say a prayer, but that could happen here. Somebody comes out of the house and somebody ran into the place and they parked across the driveway. I don't think it works. That's just my feeling at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Anyone else? You okay, Jim?
I think the height of the freestanding buildings do not blend in with the neighborhood, don't enhance the neighborhood whatsoever. I think it adds to the complexity of the parking, and just makes the whole development less attractive. I think the work that's proposed along Main Street looks great. There's a lot of positives on this development, but I think it still needs some refining. And these are the issues that, if we're ready to come to a resolve tonight, great. If not, we've got to get to some point that we can give the recommendation of some type to the city council. But I think the height of those freestanding buildings, and I think that, you know, the green space looks very enticing in Central Square on the frontage on Main Street, but it absolutely makes the traffic 1,000 times worse, where that used to be a two-way street. So, things that the members have to really consider, you know, what you want to write up, send to the city council for recommendation.
So do you have anything, so, John, go ahead.
No, I was just going to mention, you know, it's unfortunate, as far as the planning board is concerned, that, you know, we don't have the authority to make the final decision on this. The council does. You know, they are waiting for this board to forward a recommendation. You know, we've heard from the public that's here this evening. There are more people here this evening that voiced their opinion than the last public hearing, so we have a better idea. We know with every project, you know, projects are changed. Change is not a good thing for a lot of people to, you know, come to deal with. You know, just that's the nature of the thing. Nobody wants change, but change does happen. This board could say that we've heard from the public. Nobody here wishes to speak again, do they? Does anybody want to come up and, did we miss anything? If not, is there anything new that the applicant wants to present to this board? Any new information that you haven't said this evening or in prior hearings on this? If there,
It's, John Tachi again. I wish we hadn't brought up the Boys and Girls Club parking. We don't need the Boys and Girls Club parking. We can park under our building for the same amount. But what we were trying to do actually was reduce the garage that doesn't count as a story in the zoning ordinance. We were trying to get the garage out, the building down, and put the parking on a corner of the Boys and Girls Club. We know, we did not presume, I wish we didn't actually bring it up tonight. We're in the context of conversations. We thought this could be a really wonderful thing. We go back and forth between our facility and the Boys and Girls Club, supporting them with educational services. My sister sits on their facilities committee. We love the work that they do. We thought, take a piece of property that will never be used out the back, literally a third of an acre, and put 50 or 60 cars on it and give them a lease payment almost for life. That would be equivalent to a very nice donation every year. We don't need that. We really don't need it. We'll put it underneath the building and put the building back the way it was. We're really trying to do the right thing. We're just trying to do the right thing. We're trying to fix Hart Street. Hart Street's not our problem. It's been a can that's been kicked by the city for 25 years down the road. We paid for an engineering study with Allen and Majors to walk the entire Cummings Brook Basin and document it and see how much illegal dumping is going on everywhere through it, how many appurtenances are blocked and bridges and culverts are blocked, almost every single one of them. That can be fixed. We can't go on other people's land to fix the problem, even if we could. It's the city's responsibility to do that. we'll fund the study if the city wants to do it. We've reached out to Hart Street residents. We want to put together a task force. We've been working with the city council, and they're willing to support this as well. And they want to tackle this thing and solve it this time with this administration, because we have a mayor that wants to solve this problem. We don't need to do that, though. I want to tell you something. We can put all the water underground, and we cannot make it 1 gallon worse than it is. But I'd like to fix it together with you, with the city, because I spend more time here than I do in my home. So we're all ears, and we want to do the right thing together. So thanks for you doing it.
Mr. Tachi, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So you own all the houses on there except for 2?
We haven't closed on a couple of them.
Okay.
We have them under agreement.
And how long have you owned, like how far back does it go that you've owned one of these houses?
Most of them we've owned in the last 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
And one goes all the way back to about almost 20 years ago. And that was 2 Lowell Street, which we re-sided and refinished, and we have tenants living in that.
What about the ones on Main Street?
Well, we have one on the corner of our entry drive that the Charades re-sided that, and then we bought it from them, and we've kept it as basically storage.
Okay.
So that's, and
The other ones that are very dilapidated,
yes,
how long have you owned those?
about 7 or 8 years, 9 years.
Okay. And just asking, is why didn't you fix those up?
Why didn't I? Because they're uninhabitable. Anything.
I look at that area, and one of the things that appealed to me was the fact that it was a dilapidated area when you drive down there. And then I was thinking, well, why is it dilapidated? I mean, is it dilapidated to get to this point where we're going to be shown something that looks absolutely gorgeous and beautiful, and we're going to say, hey, this is great, when in fact, if those houses were just fixed up, it might have looked great to begin with?
There's one house, which is the barber's house, that is in disrepair and uninhabitable. It's amazing that people were actually living in that house. I can't describe what was inside of it. With some people were living there. The other homes that we had, we bought that were already renovated. We bought them on flip. And the other ones that we have are rented and doing well. One we just bought about 6 months ago when the gentleman died in the house. He was found dead in the house. So we want to get through this process as quickly as possible and deliver 100% on the rendering. We want to transform Central Square. We want to do the right thing. Should I have clad a house that I owned 7 years ago or 8 years ago temporarily? In retrospect, maybe yes. If that's what's important to people, I'll go out and put vinyl siding on it today. But if we go through the whole process with the council and go through all the process with the Conservation Commission, we do a full stormwater drainage plan, we do a full set of architectural drawings, we go through all the scrutiny and the QA and QC with all of the agencies and groups within the city, and get through that process, we'll be taking it all down. It'll come down in about 2 weeks. If it makes a difference to put vinyl siding on one of those houses or two of those houses, we'll do that.
No, Mr. Tachi, I think you kind of missing my point.
Okay.
But that's fine, I just had the question, I was just
Sure,
curious
it's
myself.
a good question. I
As
don't
I
blame
drive
you.
around. Yes, John?
Yep. So everybody understands, this is a recommendation that we're working on or going to possibly work towards this evening. A recommendation on this zoning overlay district to send to the city council. The city council is working on this ordinance with the developer. Ultimately, whatever happens will lead to the applicant applying for some type of project, whether it's in accordance with an overlay district that gets adopted or doesn't get adopted, but he'll have the right to apply for a development on his property in accordance with whatever the zoning is. So what we're dealing with this evening, this planning board, is to try to formulate a recommendation on what they've submitted, what we've commented on, what we've heard from the public, what we heard from the applicant, and send it to the council. Ultimately, they have the authority to adopt the zoning ordinance in some form or fashion, or not. But that's, that's for another day, and everybody here is welcome to go to the council and voice their opinion and concerns to them. Because ultimately, it is the city council that will have the authority to adopt or not. So, this board's job in this particular matter is to send a recommendation one way or another to the council. So that's what we have to work on. Whether we do it tonight or another meeting is up to this board. But that's what, I'm just informing you, that's what we're doing. There's no conclusion about this project and the zoning ordinance happening this evening. We're just working on a recommendation to forward to the city council.
Thank you. Might I say that the faster we get in front of the city councilor, in front of the city council and through the process, the faster we'll know whether we're going to build something or not. And then we can do whatever needs to be done out there.
As Mr. Heslin said, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Every new project, it's not all bad, no matter who you are in interpreting it. It's never all bad. It's never all good, And change introduced to a neighborhood, gets people concerned. And, they're concerned about their neighborhood. They want this process to work out so that they're not angry over it. They don't have to be happy, but they don't want to have to end up being angry over it. And the same with you. You want to be happy, but, you might say, hey, I worked out the best project I could, taking into consideration the concerns of the neighborhood. So there is a neighborhood there, they're filled with people that, are stakeholders in that area. Their viewpoints have to be respected. I know you've been working with everybody as transparently as possible, and, you're willing to work with everybody. You worked with the city, you acquired the fire station, which is an integral part of this project as it moves forward. We, the city, have a chance to have a 90-degree signalized intersection that will be much safer for vehicles as well as pedestrians. It'll help move traffic better. Ultimately, this project is going to, I envision it, as Mr. Heslin put it perfectly, it's going to improve what is absolutely an eyesore and a gateway location to the city of Woburn, and a location that could look a lot better than it does. And there's one way of doing that, and that's your project, as it may ultimately prove out to get approval somewhere down the line that's not in the hands of this planning board, but in the hands and the authority of the city council.
Well,
That's my 2 cents.
Well said, Mr. Director. Thank you.
All right, now we have in front of us. Yeah, it's still open.
Carol Nagel, Main Street. We all want to be good neighbors. We want to be good neighbors just like they're good neighbors. We take our time, come to these meetings. We just went through a bunch of meetings for the city council for the just north of us, the Life Science Business Overlay District, where they promised us the world. They promised us the most beautiful building you've ever seen. They promised us drainage and water mitigation, and they promised us everything they could. And last year, in April of 2024, they sold it. They flipped it. So now, it's Home Depot owns it, and to my knowledge, what's going to happen with any of the drainage they promised us and all the water mitigation they promised us is probably out 2 or 3 years, because it doesn't have to begin until they start the project or they sell it, or I don't know what. I don't know. It's an overlay district. I don't know where it stands. So anything could come in there more scary than what we thought back in 2022. So that's what makes neighbors nervous, is things like that. Like, you're creating an intersection where we don't need one. I feel we should eliminate that light and put a pedestrian light at the Boys and Girls Club crossing. We don't need another light on Main Street. We already have too many. And to take a left out onto Main Street, you can go Mishawam, you can go Eaton Ave. But my thing is, we don't need another intersection. We're creating traffic by creating an intersection where we don't need one. But we can stand here all night and day and give our recommendations, and people might think we're complaining, and then we get threatened with, well, do you want a 40B? You know what? We just want to be able to live in our neighborhoods. I live on a side street. I can't get out onto Main Street. I can't. I go back roads all the time because in the morning, even coming home at night, my 1-minute commute takes approximately 10 to 20 minutes. So that's what makes us feel the way we do. It isn't that we don't want change. We love change. We would love to see this beautiful project, but not to the tune of 195 units and 200 to 400 cars that are gonna be parked on Main Street, whether you like it or not. My son lives in Charlestown. I've seen it. I know what it's like. So I'm just saying, we do want to be good neighbors, and we do want to see a nice project there. I just think this needs to be backed up a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to clarify one issue, because it's the second time it's been brought up during the public hearing process. And that has to do with the Showcase Cinema site. So a couple of years ago, the Davis Companies of Boston, a major life science developer, entered into an agreement with National Amusements to purchase the property, subject to getting an overlay district approved. Okay, it took over a year from meeting with the council, meeting with the neighbors, meeting with the planning board, for the ordinance to be adopted. By the time the ordinance was adopted, the bottom fell out of the life science area. No one is developing life science anymore in this area. So that is the reason why Davis did not buy the property. Showcase Cinema, National Amusements, ended up selling a bunch of properties to meet some loan obligations that they had across the country. So it had nothing to do with the overlay and promises and not going forward. But I think the most important thing I want you to understand is that the issues with drainage, okay, there was a settlement on an appeal on a special permit denial of National Amusements that was settled by the both parties in the city council. And there's a document that was prepared with the city engineer and Alan and Major on behalf of Showcase Cinemas that spells out everything that needs to be done to improve the drainage up in that area. And furthermore, it contains a condition that the Showcase property cannot be developed unless all of those drainage improvements take place. So that's written entered by the court, and so before any other development gets done on that site, they have to repair the drainage issues. So I just want to make sure you have just accurate facts, that's all. Thank you.
I think we voted against that project anyways. Didn't we turn this out? Yep, I thought so. All right, any further discussion? Yes?
I had one follow-up question. On the density regulation in the proposed amendment, excuse me, of the proposed section, the maximum building coverage is 40%. Does this particular plan anticipate utilization of the full 40%?
No, it does not. We're at 30%, 30.2%. And if we need to get to 30%, we'll do it. So, no, we're not using the full 40%.
Okay, because there are other sections, I believe, other districts that call for the 30%, and for the other component, section 2, the minimum landscape usable open space, in some areas is 40%, and this is to 25%. Is this something in your project that would be at 25% for the open space?
We're at 30 to 35%.
Okay.
For a landscape area. If you've been in our property, you know how much we love landscaping. So we're trying to make buildings go away, and so we'll be presenting that to the city council.
I was just curious as to why these percentages were in here and not.
I think they were upper limits that council recommended that we, and knowing that we're dealing with just the zoning envelope at this point, and now we're coming back and getting project specific. And so we just wanted some wiggle room in order to be able to design and then present before the council. I keep pointing over there, like the council's over there. When the council is here, we'll be presenting all the detail. This is a lot more detail than we usually present at a zoning function. I think it's good that you ask for it and look for it and ask these kinds of tough questions. It's important. But we're going to go through another round of even tougher questions. But did I answer your question okay?
You did,
Okay.
thank you.
Carolyn, just a note, in the thing that John did, he has that in there.
Yeah.
About them 40-25, and sort of recommending that it's the 30, 40.
Mr. Chairman, can I help clarify what's going on here? The applicant took what was advised at our last meeting and started changing their mind about the density and everything else. Everything that we want to flag for this density, the stories, the parking, and everything else was already presented in my report for our last public hearing. So what I'd recommend this evening, if the board wants to consider it, is that we forward a recommendation to the council on this proposed overlay district and the boundaries of it, as I presented at the last meeting. Nobody came up with anything different. All the flagging necessary, the advisory language to the council is already covered in what they presented as changes tonight, and that the changes based on the advisory, the concerns that are highlighted in yellow, they'll be forwarded to the council. The council has been working with the developer for many months now relative to making sure this project, to the extent possible, fits into the neighborhood and doesn't become an eyesore or a total adverse impact. Everybody realizes that the public school being built where it was did increase the traffic to and from, dropping off and picking up. Every school's like that throughout the country. I have one of those right across the street from my house, so don't think that I'm getting away with anything, because there's nothing busier than a Primrose school or a preschool right across the street from your house with your driveway, your multi-use driveway or a shared driveway, right across the street, trying to get out of that driveway when the school's coming and going. You know, I try to get out of my driveway before they show up and not go home until they're gone. But, you know, so everybody has to deal with that type of traffic. I mean, our kids wouldn't get educated otherwise, and we do want educated kids. You know, how else are they gonna survive if they don't get an education? So, you know, it's just one of those little inconveniences in life. But I'll make a long story short. You know, we do have a recommendation, and it does flag all of the concerns that, you know, I've come to know about development over the last 40 years in this business. And, you know, it's parking, it's traffic, it's density, you know, all of those things that make up our review, and that we will send a thorough recommendation to the council, flagged with all the concerns that we've gone over in the last 2 public hearings. And that's really the best, I think, we can do with this, because ultimately the council has to hammer out and adopt what they have the authority to adopt, not us. We have the authority to recommend and advise, and that's really what I did in that report for this board. And if we could want to deliberate, we can deliberate as long as we want, obviously, but we could also move this along to the council, and this board can participate with those discussions if you so choose to do so. But the public, you have plenty of opportunity to continue working with the council on this matter, really to make sure this project works to the extent possible for you. That's my piece.
Yes, Claudia.
Through the chair to John, I have your recommendation here. I see that you've been very clear in delineating what the applicant wants and what you're potentially concerned about with the highlighting and the red strike through. So I guess the one question though that I don't understand is, would you be recommending a favorable recommendation on this ordinance change with the caveats of, hey, council, the planning board is favorable, but the council needs to be concerned about these issues that are in red? Or is your recommendation to send an unfavorable recommendation until the council deals with the things in red? Which one is it?
Or it could be a neutral.
Well, see, that's...
We're forwarding the following recommendation because these are the highlighted concerns. The board could be creative in that regard.
Well, that's actually my question.
Yeah.
My understanding was that we had 2 choices, favorable or unfavorable.
Well, I would...
Is that a misunderstanding? And I'm happy to be told that is a misunderstanding.
I would pick one or the other. You know, my personal opinion would be that, yes, there are a lot of serious tweaks that need to be implemented to have a perfect zoning overlay district and associated ordinance, new section of the zoning ordinance, to spell out the density allowances, the parking requirements, the landscaping requirements, the height restrictions. All that has to be worked out. That's flagged in here. Those things can be worked out or not, and if they're not worked out, the council can deny it. But I don't see that this project, as it's proposed in its entirety, with everything that's been worked at and looked at, and the possibilities of a much improved project area, development area of the city. I don't think we, you know, throw that away and not look at it in a favorable light, because it does have the absolute potential of being a great improvement to that area. Now, there might be people that don't agree with what I just said, but that's fine too. It's America. You have your opinion. You're entitled to it.
Okay, so just making sure that I understand, the director's recommendation is to send a favorable recommendation to the city council, but contingent upon the items that are in red being satisfactorily worked out by the council and the applicant. Is that the recommendation?
Yes, however, it's up to them to decide what to do with the concerns. We're just flagging, these are the concerns, if the board agrees. I mean, I put it in writing. It's up to the board. It's up to the majority.
Oh, no, I understand that. So then I'm misunderstanding. Your recommendation is neutral on whether the board goes favorable or unfavorable. But you've flagged the concerns that the city council needs to be working with the applicant on before they either decide to implement this overlay or decide against it. Is that a better characterization?
I would say absolutely.
Okay, so since I'm not sure that we have the legal ability to send a neutral recommendation, I mean, I'm happy to be proven wrong, but my memory was that we can't do that. Then it's up to the board to decide which way they go by majority vote. So if that's where we end up, then, you know, either there can be more discussion whether this approach makes sense to the majority here or not.
How about I put it this way? I've given you my most educated, experienced review of this and recommendation. That's my recommendation, as it stands, as it's written.
Okay.
This board, 6 members present, can vote any which way they want. It's only a recommendation from me.
No, I understand,
I
John.
have no authority to tell you what to do.
Well, John.
You guys do what you want.
I hold your recommendations in very high esteem, which is
I would
why.
hope so, and I hold
Which is
your-
why I
hold
just-
your verbal abilities and experience in very high
So-
standards,
so
because
these-
you've been here as long as I have.
Indeed. But, so I'm just making my questions to make sure that I understand what the recommendation is, as I do hold it in high esteem. I don't want to misstate it or misinterpret it in the discussion. So I think I've come to the place where the director's recommendation is not favorable or unfavorable. That he leaves to the board. But his experience in this area leads us to, whatever we choose to do, to tell the council where the potential issues are that the council needs to make the decision. Would that be fair to say, John?
Yeah,
Okay.
they only need to because they have the authority to.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm all set.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dave?
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Dave, to close the public hearing, second by Rob. All those in favor? 6-0 carries. Okay. Do we have another motion from anybody? Jim?
Well, I'd like to follow up on Claudia's point that we are going to either send a favorable or unfavorable recommendation. Typically, we give a favorable, and sometimes it's a favorable with the conditional component to it, or it's an unfavorable. And I think in this case, we're leaning towards a conditional one. And that's where I was trying to go earlier, is to address the issues that we're getting hung up upon and discuss them so we can get to those conditional points and get this moving. I think right now we're just rehashing things over and over and see what the feel is of all the board members. And I'll start it over again. My concerns are on Main Street, okay, with a 10-foot setback. Currently, there's an active street there with on-street parking. Are all the members satisfied with 4 houses, 4 units, interrupted, 4 units, interrupted, and then existing houses with 20-foot setbacks? How's that gonna look? Right? Do you feel comfortable with it? And if so, I don't currently.
Those are the houses that haven't been sold yet, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So
if he does end up getting those
There's 2 that are unsold, and there's 2 down the other end, or 2 or 3 down the other end, which will be less affected because they're not on the vendors much, as I understand it.
So that was one
My
point.
point of view is that currently they depicted a Wyman Green enhancement, which is not part of this proposal. It can't be considered. So if that was indeed already approved, my recommendation, I wouldn't be talking about this issue. The 10-foot setback, I've been in total agreement with. But currently, that is not the case, so I don't agree with it. I can only agree with what's actual today,
So,
not part of our proposal.
in that case, where they're looking for the minimum setback along Main Street of 10 feet, in highlighted red, we would put, if we're in agreement with Jim, please consider the 20-foot setback.
Keep it at 20 feet and no relief to the 10 unless they go through a special permit or, the, you know, if and when the green goes in, right?
All right, is anybody in disagreement with that and putting that in? No? Okay, good, that's it.
You know? Height of the buildings, the freestanding buildings. Currently, they call for a 5-story and 65 feet, I believe.
I think, John, don't you mention something in there about the heights?
Yeah, yep. It is.
Is this the part here, except with respect to maximum height, the specific dimension requirements
Right.
of section 35 below shall apply only to the district as a whole and not to individual lots? And you're asking the city council to take a look at that, because you don't think that
Which they are already. I mean, again, they're going to be cognizant of the height issue and amenable to it or not.
But so that kind of, so
I'm looking to cut it down to 4 stories. Question was asked, not aware of any 6-story buildings in Ward 4.
okay. Are you okay with what John has in there already, or you want more?
I would like to change it and with the condition that it only be at the 4-story max.
So it would be under that particular section, and then after that, the city council may want to provision clarified, and then it would say we would recommend
4 stories with no height.
stories with no height. Okay, anybody disagree with that? No. Okay.
That's with no height limit, 4 story.
Well, no height associated with it, correct.
Okay.
Currently, they have 65 feet, and they look to propose 5 stories, and I'm saying 4 stories, period.
Anything else, Jim?
That will do for now.
Okay. Anybody else that would like to add anything in here?
I'm sorry, I missed it. Is there a motion on the floor?
There is no motion on the floor because Jim wanted to make changes to this. We
Understood.
have agreed
So-
to his changes.
Okay.
So now there is.
So why don't I do this?
Entertain a motion
Certainly.
for either.
I would make a motion to send a favorable recommendation to the city council with the caveats mentioned in Director Cashel's report, further modified by the changes made by Jim. So essentially, it would send a favorable recommendation together with this document that has all of the highlighting in yellow and the red underline. And then in addition, it would have the comments made by Jim under the, next to the red. And that would be the sum total of our recommendation.
Well, even though they were comments made by Jim, they were approved by all of us.
Agreed.
We
So
agreed.
it
So
would
it's
be-
the board's.
Yeah, it would be this
not-
document,
not
a
just
favorable
Jim's.
recommendation
Even though
with Jim's
it is your recommendation.
comments added, that would be our recommendation
Okay,
as a planning board. So that's my motion.
okay.
Would we, for formality, call it a conditional favorable?
Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Second by Jim. Motion by Claudia, second by Jim. All those in favor?
Discussion.
For discussion, sure.
I would like there to be a note to take a special look at the parking situation, because there's been too much going around in circles about what we're doing with parking on this thing. And I'm very concerned that in the end, that it may not be to the benefit of the people who live in the neighborhood if we don't, you know, just remind them to take an extra special look at this, because this is different than anything else we've done. And we're plopping down this big thing in this middle of this residential neighborhood, and it's absolutely gonna impact parking if it's not taken care of on-site.
So noted.
Okay. Because they will, I mean, they're gonna look at that separately.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, that's
But
a whole-
I'm really concerned about that.
And it'll be treated separately, so I'm sure that, I hope they're very concerned about it also. All right, so on the motion with the added caveat. All in favor? 6-0 carries. Good luck with the council.
Thank you.
Hopefully they listen to it. So.
That's how they can do. They can.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Because nothing ever went.
it's in the paper.
But nothing's there.
No, the movie theater is still there. And the big parking lot where kids, people take their kids to practice driving.
No, I'm sure it was in the paper, but I just remember that we. Anybody want to make a motion for a 5-minute recess, just so we can let the room clear?
Yeah, that's all.
Motion by Dave for a 5-minute recess, second by
5-minute
Carolyn. All those in favor, aye. All those opposed, nay. Okay.
leave the issue.
Accessory dwelling units, and B, amending section 5.1, table of use regulations by adding the following: 1A, to allow accessory dwelling units attached within or detached to a single-family dwelling in the following zoning districts: R1, R2, R3, R4, and S1. And 1B, to allow accessory dwelling units attached within or detached to legally pre-existing, non-conforming, single-family dwellings in all zoning districts. Note, the aforementioned zonings amendments are petitioned by said parties in accordance with Mass General Law, the Affordable Homes Act, C.150, Section 7 and 8. Hi.
Hi. Good evening, all. Good to see you all. It's been a while. For the record, City Solicitor Mark Salvati, presenting the zoning amendment change requested for the City of Woburn. As you may know, I hope you know, that the state has mandated that we adopt this requirement due to the housing shortage in the state. And we have been working for quite a while on some of the language. We had several meetings. We actually had a committee John was on, Karen assisted, and Board of Appeals chairwoman was on it, building commissioner, President Dillon. So we came up with what we think what are reasonable regulations, which is all that the state allows you to do. So they're mandating that you do certain things. They are codified in CMR 760, Section 71, and the rest of it can be reasonable regulations. I will highlight it a little bit. As you may know, they're limited in size to 900 square feet, or there's a smaller or less if it's if the house is smaller than 1,800. And the big thing, and I think some of the misunderstanding comes from this, is that the state stated that it could be in a single-family residence only, but then they went on to define single-family zone only. But they went on to define zone by saying any area that allows single-family homes. So even in R3, R4, S1, they're allowed there. And if you have an existing non-conforming single-family home in any other district, whether it's IP or anything else, and it's legally non-conforming, you can put one on there as well. That's why there's the second provision in 1B. So hopefully you read some of it. It's not too complicated, but I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have, and I think John could do the same.
Any questions? Yes, Jim.
Mark, you're saying that an existing non-conforming for side or front setbacks, as long as they meet the 900 gross square feet?
Yes, and maintain no greater setback encroachment. So if you're 10 feet off the lot line,
Yep.
If you want to add on with an ADU and you meet all the other requirements, you could be 10 feet off the lot line.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Any other questions? Dave?
So, I'm only playing this in my head because it pertains to me and I'm aware of it, but I'm not asking for my personal self. If
I'd have to charge you.
If you have a very large single-family house, which is in an R2 zone, and you technically could convert that to a two-family. But you also had a 900-square-foot carriage house in your backyard, and you opted to make the 900-square-foot carriage house, this auxiliary,
ADU, yeah.
that would then negate your ability to change the larger house into a two-family?
I think that question is open to discussion with the state. We would probably not allow it if appealed. The state may have a different perspective, but it's not prohibited or allowed in the CMR right now. They don't really address the ability to put, if you did it in the reverse, to even put a ADU on a two-family. However, because the primary use has to be single, all right? However, to take that to the extreme in a sense, if that were a condoized two-family, now that's two primary uses technically, and could you put an ADU on one of those condos? I think the state would say yes. I think we could, we're saying now that we're not putting it in this amendment, that you can put it on a two. So it's prohibited today, but someone may challenge that. But to answer your question, I don't know how, if you did an ADU today on a single family and then went to convert that single to a two after you have the ADU, I think that's possible because the ADU doesn't render that lot a two-family lot. In fact, I don't know what the assessors are going to do with this, but it's going to be a problem. But it's to us, we've been calling it a 1+, and therefore not a 2. Therefore, potentially, you could go from a 1 to a 2 on that bigger unit.
I'm not expecting the kids to put me out there yet.
Yeah.
But it's always a consideration.
But you'd have to meet the setbacks on that carriage house, and a lot won't.
There is no setback. That carriage house is the lot line.
Yeah, that's the problem with all these garages. We did make somewhat of a concession in this to say that a detached ADU could be half the distance to the rear at 15. But everything else, if that doesn't meet the 20 on the side or the 15 on the rear, it wouldn't be allowed today.
Right, but since this structure was built in 1870 and the stone wall is about 300 years old, and that structure was butted up against that, and it's a monument. I mean, it's the actual line.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just a
Sure.
wall, it's the actual property line. Is there anything that, because all this stuff, and I'm just spitballing because there's a
Yep.
lot of places in the city that existed for a long, long, long time that they are grandfathered against all the setbacks?
This provision doesn't allow for it, this amendment. You could seek zoning relief from the Board of Appeals for a variance on an ADU, but, I think they're gonna treat it as if it were part of the primary residence, and therefore our hardship doesn't exist, but that's to be seen as far as we can tell. These are problems that the state tried to address. They had multiple webinars, and John might have a better idea on it.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, John.
Karen and I attended a Zoom meeting this afternoon. It lasted almost 2 hours on this. This is still evolving, the provisions for this, almost on a daily basis still. This is real sausage being made right before our very eyes. But the one thing everybody should take into consideration, Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, and I believe, but I'm not positive, Connecticut and Rhode Island have already adopted such an ordinance or statute for municipalities to adopt. In New Hampshire, I know for a fact, has had it in place, this very same language in their statutes for over 10 years. So every city and town in New Hampshire has this same language that allows for ADUs by right in most instances. And, it really never turned the state upside down. People have the right to apply for them and to have them permitted, but, it just isn't a total onslaught of ADUs everywhere. That never emerged. These are expensive assets to add to anyone's property, and it's a big investment. So you really have to have a need for it, a want for it. A lot of people just don't want to have any type of tenants on their property other than immediate family. I mean, people like that. So it is a statute that's established to help create housing. You know, you can tell by all the language in it, but it's also a statute that helps to keep families together, whether they're elderly parents, grandparents, or kids, you know, trying to get a foothold in having a roof over their heads and providing for, you know, their young families, you know, save money before they can, you know, get a down payment going for their own property. So it has a lot of pluses relative to strengthening the families, and that's a lot of what this is about, too. But it's also trying to address the housing, you know, so-called housing crisis.
Yeah, another positive is that it would legalize things that are going on today.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's great.
You think so?
Yeah, no,
It should.
But there's also a plus that we didn't talk about, which is that there's a lot of families that have disabled children.
Sure.
And this would allow them to have a degree of independence, but still be close enough to the family that they could give the assistance necessary.
Yeah, or a caretaker come live there.
Correct.
Yeah. I will add that the only requirement for parking is to add one space for an ADU unless you're within certain distance of a transit. But you don't need any, but that's not very many, so.
Question, currently we have accessory buildings language in our zoning, and this is clearly just for dwelling.
Correct. So the accessory building would include a garage, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So is there any thought within the city about, if you already have an existing structure on your property, now you want to do an accessory dwelling, how that has to be dealt with for setbacks?
Well, our proposal says the existing accessory dwelling has no bearing on an ADU. But this is going to the council as well. Go to committee up there and probably vetted pretty well. You know, it's already been adopted by the state, but we have a little bit of time to adopt our own regulations, and that can be discussed. I suppose you could make the argument that if someone has a carriage house that's properly built, and the problem, of course, is safety, you know, firefighting. So if they can't get at the back of these things, you know, there's a problem. So that's one of the big things.
Thank you.
I'm looking through the zoning ordinance. Do you know right now what is the setbacks for a detached garage?
A detached garage is 4 feet.
4 feet, okay.
To the rear.
4 feet, okay.
But it's 12.
12 foot
12
for
to the
this.
side, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So any shed or garage it can be 4 feet.
4 feet.
Yeah.
Claudia?
I cannot let a typo go.
Uh-oh.
Sorry. On the bottom of
That's got to be
page-
President Dillon's fault.
I did.
Yeah.
I apologize, but I just can't do it. On number 11, prohibited oh wait, hold on. It's 36.3. The very last line on the handwritten page 5, provided that the city may reasonably regulate instead of reasonable regulate. If someone could put a Y on reasonable, I would be so happy.
Give me the reference again, number 11?
It's 36.3, regulation of protected use ADUs in single-family residential zoning districts. That heading, there's one paragraph that begins, "The city of Woburn shall not prohibit."
Okay.
The last line, provided that the city may reasonably, instead of reasonable, regulate. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you for humoring me.
That's not human.
Generally speaking, what I'm seeing here is the sausage is being made. And the definition of what is reasonable regulation or unreasonable regulation, I would imagine, has yet to be determined, right? So what you're doing here is you are under 36.3, you're saying, well, here's what we think are reasonable.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And whether someone aggrieved tries to sue the city and change it in the future, obviously that is to be seen. But this is your best work through.
Correct.
Of what is reasonable and in the best interest of the community. Would that
Yes.
be fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Okay.
And the guidelines came out, there were certain things that weren't in there, and it's evolved quite a bit. They started out by saying it had to be owner occupied. They took that away. It's in their regs that it doesn't have to be owner occupied. There were several different items like that. Short-term rental is one thing we can prohibit, which we've done. And, basically the setbacks is pretty much. We've also kept the ground coverage. So they really,
So with the knowledge that this is evolving,
Yep.
this is, a stake in the ground that gets us into compliance.
correct.
We'll see how it works,
How it
and it can
works.
always be modified in the future. Would that be
Yes.
fair to say?
And the state may come down with different rules as we go.
Indeed.
Yep.
Indeed. Thank you, I'm all set.
Okay, Dave?
I have one last question. When we floated this about 12 years ago, you probably remember that.
We used to call her an in-law.
Yes.
Yes.
The reason the city said no was they said that they would have to hire another person for the building department whose job would be to go around and check all these things out on an annualized basis.
And get affidavits as to relationship.
Correct.
Yeah.
So is any of that required?
So there is a reporting requirement from the building department, but because there is no requirement for relationship in these ADUs, the only requirement the building department will have is to issue a building permit. And reporting back each year as to how many units they have, but there won't be a yearly
Okay.
inspection or anything like that. Yep.
Any other questions? This is a public hearing. If anybody would like to come up and speak in regards to this zoning amendment?
Thank you, Chair Doherty, Mr. Cashel, members. I appreciate all you guys, your time, energy, and effort you put into the city to help it make it what it is. Ken Parley, 5 Marion Street, in North Woburn. Now, I've spent my whole life fixing things up and trying to save things that were malnourished or treating to try to save them. But our existing zoning will dictate, for the most part, to demolish things that my grandfather and your mother has built to help accommodate for the hard gentrification that has been presented through our lack of stores of value, for our lack of supply of housing, hence why this bill has been brought forward. Now, I was set back, and I've slowly turned into where I wanted to build and save things, where now I'm a gentrification dealer. I saw this as an opportunity to have a more inclusive gentrification for the existing community. And this is a blue-collar bill. It's for seniors, young people. It's a huge win, in my opinion. Now, when I saw the notice that was presented from the city, and I might be doing a little bit of reading here, guys. I know you had a long night already, but this is pretty important to me. Is the zoning ordinance as amended, Section 5.1, table use regulations by adding to allow accessory dwelling units attached within or detached to a single-family dwelling in the following zoning districts. Now, inside Chapter 150, Section 3, which, right, we had this massive bond bill, right? Was it over $4 billion, Mr. Cashel? Is that correct?
Yep.
There is one paragraph that describes this right to be given to residents of the state of Massachusetts. Now, inside that amendment, I'm going to make sure I'm clear here. I'm going to read this briefly. Section 3 of said Chapter 40A, as so appearing, is hereby amended by adding the following paragraph. No zoning ordinance or bylaw shall prohibit, unreasonably restrict, or require a special permit or other discretionary zoning approval for the use of land, structures for a single accessory dwelling unit, or rental thereof, in a single-family residential zoning district. Now, it's important to make note of that single-family residential zoning district. In no shape or form does it say a single-family dwelling. It's very concise, it's very clear in all that language. It explicitly writes a single-family residentially zoned district, hence R1, R2, R3, S1, because we have by right for single-family dwellings. Now, as you go on, and you go land structures, 310, so I don't want to go back on. Now, I'll just keep going on here. Accessory dwelling unit, this paragraph, to be reasonable regulations, including but not limited to, if applicable, plan site review, regulations concerning dimensional setbacks, and the bulk and height of structures, and may be subject to restrictions prohibited short-term rental as defined in section 1. Now, I want to bounce because that was what was in the bond bill.
Speakable content could be found on the screen.
Sorry about that.
Sorry to interrupt you, John. Sorry, that was a joke. Sorry, guys. Yeah, lighten it up a little bit. All right. So now we got issued deeper guidelines from them. So I'll float to that. Now we'll come down here. The Act of 7060 CMR 71.00 seek to balance municipal interests in regulating the use, construction of ADUs while empowering property owners to add much-needed housing stock to address the Commonwealth's housing needs. The Act establishes that in certain circumstances, the use of land or structures for ADU are protected from zoning restrictions by providing that zoning shall not prohibit or structures for a single ADU or the rental thereof in a single-family residentially zoned district. The Act creation and use of ADUs. The Act, however, explicitly prohibits municipalities from imposing principal dwellings and imposing limitation on municipal parking requirements. In no shape or form does it label single-family dwelling, which is defined inside the 760 CMR 7100. So I'm not here to make an argument of whether what has been proposed by the city is conforming to the 760 CMR 711. Just intrinsically off this notice, it should define, as in making sure it's for single-family, I'm sorry, one more time, for single-family residential zoning districts for principal dwellings. That's what's defined in the 710 CMR. Now, I'll come down to 7106 of what was proposed from us here. Let's see here. No, 7106 here. Oh, no, that's of the CMR 71 of the 760. So let me go over here. And before I do that, actually, let me go over a definition of principal dwelling unit, which is defined by that CMR. A structure, regardless of whether it conforms to zoning, including use requirements and dimensional requirements, such as setbacks, bulk, height, that contains at least one dwelling unit and is located on the same lot as a protected use ADU. Now, it's also defined as single-family residential dwelling to help define the definition of a single-family residential zoning district. But in no shape or form is that language in any other part of the 760 CMR. But what is defined in there is principal dwelling, which I believe I just read to you. Okay, a couple other case in points I wanted to go down here. We come over to what we provided and residential dwellings, 3gen, 60C, those are the definitions. All right. So we have in our number 2, in what was proposed from the city. An attached ADU complying with section 6.1 shall be allowed by right in pre-existing legally non-conforming single-family home in all districts. That should say principal dwelling to be conforming to the 760 CMR. Next on that, I would say, section 6 of in that is, a detached ADU must be at least 10 feet from the primary structure. Now, that's kind of I don't really see, other than fire, you can make an argument, but in the code, and there's actually guidance from the state stating what we need to do about fire, and a lot of it is being 50 feet from the street. And second is actually 5 feet is the minimum standard to the building code for fire restrictions. Hence, you go into Portsmouth or Boston, that's why they're brick, right? But there's a lot of code to help for fire prevention, along with the dimensionals of windows. I believe it has to be less than 15% exposed if it comes within 3 to 5 feet. So there's use for that. So I think there's an argument, a strong argument, that that's an unreasonable regulation. Last is, I would come down to, there is a height requirement. And number 7, the height of any detached ADU shall be a maximum of 20 feet at the peak of the detached structure. Now, I would take you back to the 760 from the state, and I would go to 71(3)(b)(2). So we'll go to 71(3)(b)(2). And it states dimensional standards. Any requirement concerning dimensional setbacks, lot size, lot coverage, open space, and the bulk height of structures that are more restrictive than, this is the one time it's mentioned in the 760 CMR other than the definition of a single-family residential zone district, is what is required for a single-family residential dwelling in the single-family residential dwelling zoning district, in which is protected use ADU. So we can't put any setback, or dimensional requirements, heights, or anything of that nature that isn't applied to our R1 zoning, which is essentially our baseline single-family. Yes, sir.
Can I?
Please, I would love this.
Save you some verbiage. What is clear about this statute is that you, as a property owner.
Correct.
Of a single-family home, you have the right now, to go down to the building commissioner and apply for an ADU and receive that, regardless of whether or not the city has a zoning ordinance adopted.
Mhm.
We haven't done that yet. This literally, this statute is changing through the guideline revisions that are taking place almost daily. I'm not kidding about that. So, if you're concerned yourself, or you want to tell your friends, you do have the statutory right to apply for a building permit for an ADU in your single-family home.
Well,
Everybody in the state has that authority
Yeah,
right now to do that in any town they live in.
I don't
There's
have
no
a single-family
disputing that.
home, John.
What's that?
I don't
What?
have a single-family home. I have a principal dwelling.
Yeah.
That's been defined by the state.
Yeah.
And as of right now, with what's being proposed, is I would be denied the right.
Why, is it a duplex?
That's correct. But it's my principal dwelling. I would be denied the right, John.
Well, that's not for us to decide. It's
Well,
not for the city to decide.
on the other end is if you're gonna make a recommendation-
You could bring your argument to the AG or the Executive Office of Housing Livable Communities and present your case to them. The way they're developing this, they'll probably take it into consideration and change the guidelines for this. That's what's happening.
So is it responsible of the city to deny the right at this point? Or issue
no.
guidance
No, in
that hasn't
accord-
been
in
reviewed by the
accordance-
EOHLC?
In accordance with the state statute, okay, and the provisions allowed for everyone that does own a single-family house. They can
This
apply-
single-family house, John, that's made up, it's principal
Yeah,
dwelling.
but that's all the statute allows for, a single-family house. You want to put an ADU in it or in the backyard?
Where does it say single-family home in the 70s, in the CMR, John?
You know what?
Well, no, just,
Yeah, but
where does it,
why-
can you show it to me, so I can understand it,
You're
please?
litigating this issue of which we do not have that language in front of us.
Yeah.
All we have is what they've come up with so far. You need to argue this with the state. Go to the AG's office, talk to an attorney there, bring it to their attention. But, you know, we can only adopt what the state has provided for. We can't make this stuff up.
What you're adopting,
What?
what is proposed to being adopted, isn't what the state provided, John.
Yeah, we can only adopt.
So, Mr. Polly.
Yes, sir.
What you're saying is that what is before us now
Is I believe,
is not what the state is saying.
correct.
Okay.
And I believe what's being proposed will impede on people's rights that's been demanded by the state.
Now, us on the planning board, this is the first time we've seen this.
Yes.
So we have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, most of what you were talking about was just going,
Oh, I'm sorry.
because we haven't seen it before.
I don't know if you could tell, I'm a little fired up. This is exciting stuff.
So, in John, you're saying that, so what Mr. Polly's saying is that we're setting up something different than what the state has.
That's correct.
And you're saying we're not. We're doing exactly what the state tells us.
Right.
Okay.
This statute says what it says. The guidelines say what
So
they
this
say.
makes,
but
so in terms of the planning board, in my mind, this makes it a little confusing in terms of whether I can approve it or not approve it. Because I trust you guys did your homework, but he's reading directly from something that's telling me that we're not doing exactly what.
That's correct.
And you can address that.
I have, sadly, in this day and age, I have counselors in several municipalities, and I bounced this off of them. They say, Ken, you're right with what you're saying, what's being proposed. I didn't want to be in a state where I have to bring in a litigator or counsel I just want to present the case as where I would hate to see the city pass something that would be denying people rights. And what's being proposed should say principal dwellings and not single-family homes, because single-family homes is not in the 760 CMR. It's not in there, John.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, John, hey, I love you, bud, you know what I mean? It's tough for me when I feel like there's an impression where I'm gonna be denied rights that the state demanded we're given.
I'll give you names of people and their contact information with the Executive Office of Housing Communities and the AG's office.
Yes.
right, For you to talk to.
Okay.
And you know what? You have to have them agree with your position. And if they do, they'll clarify it in the guidelines.
Right.
Your language is wrong, John.
I'm confused here because Mr. Polly is reading something directly from the state statute on this particular
This is in the
subject.
760.
So-
This is inside the 760.
So that's, that's where I'm confused, because you're saying it's not in there.
Well, what I'm saying is.
He's saying it's in there.
Yeah, what I'm
He's
saying
reading from
is
something.
everything.
It should say principal dwelling. Single-family home is not defined in the 760 CMR. If you copied and pasted it and brought it over, that would be one thing. But I'm seeing a lot of anomalies, and I'm seeing things that have been defined as unreasonable regulations inside the proposed amendment change.
The state is trying to make sure that no one's right to an ADU is being infringed upon. They want housing to be created. They do. Your interpretation, I have not heard yet, nor I don't know if anybody in this room has heard your interpretation as being allowed within the statutory language or the guideline language. Now, I'm not saying that it can't happen. Your best position is to argue this point to the authorities that are actually drafting these guidelines and revising them as they become aware of issues. And I'm not kidding about this.
Yes.
For the last several months, they've been listening to the concerns of planners, building commissioners, from city solicitors, town councils. They've been hearing from people, average people, coming to them with complaints about this statute, and that it needs to be further amended through the guideline provisions. and they have been doing that. I don't know how many different
Through the chair
additions.
to John.
Yes.
So, Karen gave me this model zoning for accessory dwelling units from the MAPC.
Right.
And I just turned to a page, and it says protected use ADUs. And I don't know anything about this, I'll be honest.
Okay.
I'm a lawyer, but I'm not this kind of lawyer.
Oh, yeah.
And what I'm reading, it says, there's like a little green do, and I'm thinking, well, do, that means like, that's good. And it says, allow protected use ADUs by right within or on lots with a principal dwelling, which is your point, right? This includes single-family residential dwellings, duplexes, triple-deckers, multifamily buildings, and mixed-use residential buildings within a single-family residential zoning district. When there are already 2 or more units in a building on a lot, the entire existing structure is considered the principal dwelling. For example, a triple-decker would be the principal dwelling, not any one unit in the triple-decker.
Thank
Is
you,
that your
Claudia.
point, sir?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. Thank you.
So this is where, I mean, like I said, I don't know anything about anything. I just opened this up.
It's as clear,
And it's in the model zoning for accessory dwelling units. So, you know, Mr. Savati, I don't know anything about anything, but does this make any sense that there could be, that the definition of principal dwelling includes single-family residential dwellings, duplexes, triple-deckers, multifamily? Like, I don't know what the citation is for this,
Yeah,
but,
and we don't know when that came down, or whether that was considered by the state when it got adopted, but what I started out by saying at the beginning was, we're not prohibiting a ADU on a 2-family or a 3-family. We're just not taking a position. If it's allowed by the CMR, then it's allowed by the CMR, which is what John was saying.
yeah. And I think Mr. Parley's point is, well, okay, but, you know, then the city of Woburn ordinance should be as transparent as possible onto what is allowed and what's not. And your point is, boy, it's really hard to figure out what's allowed and what's not, because it's changing constantly.
especially, I'm sorry.
If I could,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, and not to be a contrarian here. However, there was an attorney in today's Zoom meeting that took this position, but there was an attorney in the same Zoom meeting working for the Executive Office, Housing and Community Development, that stated that this isn't the case. So nobody knows for sure what's right or what's wrong yet. And you know what, maybe this point has to be drilled home so that the city of Woburn is actually adopting the allowances of the statute in the associated guidelines.
If I can make a suggestion.
Go ahead, please.
If there's a recommendation to go up to the council, which I'm sure is going to be vetted quite closely, Mr. Parley will be there, state that issue, that it should be clarified.
If we could I'm sorry.
If I was told to do it, yeah.
What you were saying earlier is that it's allowable in any zoning district that allows single-family housing. Isn't that what you had said earlier, Mark?
Correct.
Okay. So if your duplex is in an S2, an R2 or an R3, that allows R1s, single-family houses, you are eligible to do this, just based on what I'm hearing.
I think that's a interpretation of the statute. That's one interpretation, yes.
So
We
you're
didn't
not-
take a
you're
position
not
on
shut
it.
out.
Yeah.
When I look at what was proposed, and it specifically says single-family dwelling or home, and you take away the fact that the 760 says principal dwelling, you create unreasonable regulation because it's not conforming to the 760 CMR. So I would recommend that before this goes to the council, we have something that is conforming in its entirety to the 760 CMR, so there's no confusion or misconceptions. Because when I see this, I see single-family dwelling, you can make a strong argument that I would lose or be denied the right for an accessory dwelling unit at my principal dwelling.
It does have to be kind of you guys have to go back and maybe write it a little bit differently in the sense that when you look at it, it does say, in a single-family residential zoning district. So, and when you guys did this, you're basically saying you could, what your thought was you could do it in any zone as long as it allowed single-family housing.
Correct.
Okay. This kind of just says, in a single-family residential zoning district.
But that is.
Actually,
but-
Bob, the problem
but the
that he's
district is-
pointing out, is on page hand numbered 6, and it's under 2. So you see how it says 36.3 on page 5, and then you flip to page 6.
Yes.
And then it says 2, an attached ADU complying with section 6.1 shall be allowed by right in a pre-existing legally non-conforming single-family home in all districts. That's his problem. You see my point? It doesn't say, it doesn't, I'm understanding you, sir, right? That's your problem?
It should say principal dwelling, as long as the amendment itself should say principal dwelling, because that's what's defined by the 760 CMR.
And so.
Which would control.
Right, I do understand your point, and I understand Mr. Salvati's point that that is still in flux. It's somehow still in play, right, Mark? That's what you're
Correct.
saying? Okay. So the question on the table is, can this be resolved before the council votes on it?
Well, the council can do one of, I mean, I can't really advise being the petitioner.
Yeah,
but-
it's a little bit awkward. Mr. Parley, it's a little bit awkward because you're standing next to our lawyer,
Yeah.
right?
But-
So that's the problem.
But let me make the suggestion, the planning board could take that position and send a recommendation with a request to change it
We could send a positive recommendation,
with the following
the
change.
following change in that particular, whether we say, principal dwelling, which I don't know if a trailer could be a principal.
And it has to be noted, too, that the CMRs in the ADU ordinance that's been drafted by the city, this new stuff was created afterwards, like I said earlier.
No, I do
This
understand.
sausage ingredient was put in after the fact.
Understood,
Yeah.
right, understood,
And-
but my question to Mark earlier was, boy, what's reasonable and what's unreasonable has sort of yet to be either litigated or determined. And what Mr. Parley is bringing forward is, hey, I can show you right now that there's a problem because I think it's already unreasonable, right? And so we're just being forewarned
Right.
that there's an issue. So it makes sense to give this to the council and say, hey, okay, this is a good idea. We're forewarned that there's an issue on section 36.3, number 2, as to whether it should say legally non-conforming principal dwelling.
Correct.
As opposed to legally non-conforming single-family home.
Correct.
So how about you just, think about that before you adopt it?
Yeah, and the other contradiction that's involved with this is that you're allowed one ADU by right. If you wanted a second ADU for your single-family house, if you wanted a second one, you have to get a special permit for that. So when they're making this, a lot of it's not making any sense. So if you already have a duplex, that's your principal structure, and you want to add an ADU. Now, the logic would require you, that would be your third unit, that would require, by logic, that you'd have to get a special permit for that. That allowance is a special permit requirement issued by the special permit granting authority that hasn't been established yet, who that would be, most likely the council. But that's the contradictions, or one of them, that's going on in this thing. And, just so you know the insanity involved with this, is that there's no limitation to the number of bedrooms in an ADU. So, you could have these theoretically the size of little doghouses in your ADU, and there's no limitation to the amount of people that can be occupying.
All right, I officially
Yeah,
give
well,
up.
for the record, John, I grew up in that house.
No, but I'm
with
just saying,
6
it-
people.
so much
There
of
was
this
6
is
people in a
crazy.
900 square foot home.
We have to
no,
get this, we
just-
have to get this back in
Middle housing.
control here.
We need to delete the word single-family home with what's being proposed because it is an unreasonable
That's what.
restriction.
what
It should never even, you will be denying people the right. And that's why I came to be on the record, because that's what the city will be doing, is denying people rights. Is that what we're here to do, John? My patriot friend? Should we be denying anybody rights in the city of
The
Woburn?
way this law reads and how it.
You like that, Mr. Klein?
Mr. Polly, I think we.
Okay, I just want to be married,
we
like, because if
agree with
we
you.
go and pushing
We
something.
agree with you. We agree with you.
Thank you.
brought up a.
Oh, my God.
You brought up a good.
Fantastic.
Did you have a
May I
question?
rest?
I just have one other
Mark?
question. Were you, Mr. Polly, were you concerned about some of the restrictions that the city was placing?
Well, yeah, as of right now, with how this is coming out, or what's been proposed, I would be denied the right.
But I mean, on
And the
setbacks-
760 gives me the right.
Right, but you were saying earlier, I thought you were talking somewhat about setbacks is really.
Correct. We cannot have a height requirement. So, and that was stated in, let me just give you my note there, which was in 71, 3.B.2.
What about setbacks?
Our minimum requirement is what's in R1, from what my understanding. If it's a single-family dwelling zoned district, that would be.
For a principal dwelling or accessory structure.
So I'll read that. I actually know where it is.
No, I'll take your word for it. You don't have to.
3B. Hold on here. Let me go at dimensional standards.
B2.
Okay.
B2, any requirement concerning dimensional setbacks, lot size, lot coverage, open space, and the bulk and height of structures that are more restrictive than, the second time that single-family dwelling is mentioned, this is the second, what is required for a single-family residential dwelling in the single-family residential zoning district, in which is protected use ADU zoning.
So in other words, you're saying as long as it follows the regular rules for that zone, you can't put a more restrictive zone?
Then I won.
Okay, I'm good.
That's what it appears
Thank you.
as.
Mr. Parlay, Mr.
Zoning
Chairman.
Or accessory structure.
Have you recently read what Cambridge has done?
Yes, they removed all restrictions and created a free market,
You
which
wouldn't
is
be-
pretty exciting.
You wouldn't, are you going to propose that for the city of Woburn?
No, I'm actually not. I just want to work and keep fixing up my neighborhoods and keep families inside the city of Woburn. John, I'm actively building a home for a firefighter, a teacher, a father, 4 children on one lot. They had to sell 2 houses to keep this family together, and I'm getting paid 75 cents on the dollar to do it because I grew up with her. That's what I'm doing right now, John.
As long as we end up with 10 housing units per 12,000 square.
I want people to have rights to their land, John.
65 feet in height, we should be Barcelona in no time.
There's nothing implying that. I think R1, the minimum standard, is a pretty good standard to be set forth. I just want us to make sure that we're following the state's guidelines and that residents get the rights that are deserved in every single-family residentially zoned district in their principal dwelling.
The reality might be that, some of these guidelines might end up being challenged and probably successfully challenged. So why should the city of Woburn consider, reaching out and going outside of the ballpark? With adopting a zoning ordinance that just really has so much of an adverse impact to the quality of life for the residents of the city.
John, if I'm denied the right, I will be litigating with the city of
Apply
Woburn.
for it then, whatever
All
you
right.
want, apply for it and see where it goes.
Okay, I have to break this.
Thank you.
have to break
Thank you,
this up.
guys. I appreciate
can't-
you guys.
I can't.
Thank you.
Thank
Seriously, thank
sir.
you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know, is anybody else in the public who want to speak in regards to this zoning?
Hi, thank you. My name's Eric Roderick. I currently own 7 and 10 Russell Court. And as far as ADUs are concerned, I think it's a good idea. I think the spirit of the law is correct. I would like to see the city look at it through the lens that John spoke of, not to be restrictive, but to make sure that it doesn't negatively impact the city as a whole. I do like the fact that it will legalize some of the probably illegal rentals that are taking place. And I came to actually understand before the statute is implemented, to John's point, would I be able to just go and apply for an ADU for both 7 Russell Court and 10 Russell Court right now without this being held accountable to any statute before it's voted on by the city council?
To be completely honest with you, yes.
That's what I thought. Okay. Not that I am going to do that, because I have other ideas in mind at the present time. But I was curious to know if that were the case. And if I were to do that, would it be grandfathered in? So if a statute were then to be voted on by the city council, and it was different than what I pulled the permits for, would I then be able to operate under the existing lack of a statute for that?
Regardless? No, but.
Why?
Because he doesn't know what your lot looks like, what your setbacks are now.
Well, everyone knows my property. It's 5.5 acres.
I'm only
on 10 Russell
advising-
Court.
You're being a zoning attorney if you ask him that.
Yeah.
Okay, but no, I respect that. It's a valid question.
I get it.
Yeah.
I'm only saying that you can apply. It doesn't mean you're gonna get a permit.
Right,
But
yeah.
everybody has the right to
I'll be
apply.
completely transparent. I have no intent of doing that. I'm just trying to understand, because this was an interesting conversation. And I do have 5.5 acres at 10 Russell Court, and I have a much smaller lot at 7 Russell Court, so I certainly would meet the setback requirements, and every other thing for that matter. So that's good. Thank you for that, and I would encourage the city to look at it very responsibly. I think what you do is tremendously important. I'm very impressed with the job that the planning board has done just tonight and everything that I've seen, so thank you.
Thank you. Please sign that.
Oh, yeah.
We can send you our newsletter.
And we appreciate kind words.
Oh, yeah, no, it's really, it's fascinating. I came here to learn about it.
Okay, is there anybody else in the public that would like to speak? I guess not. I'd say no. So I will entertain a motion.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Motion by Claudia to close the public hearing, second by Dave. All those in favor? All those opposed? 6-0, carries. All right, on the subject in front of us, which is the zoning amendment. Actually, it's not an amendment.
I would
Zoning.
make a motion to send a favorable recommendation to the city council with the suggestion that the city council look carefully at 36.3, definition 2, and consider substituting single-family home with principal dwelling. Consider it on the, including the advice of their council. And then, what was the other issue? I'm sorry.
The height.
Oh, yeah,
Height and setback restrictions.
yeah, and to consider whether height setback restrictions would potentially create more litigation, or whether the city really wants to try for it. So that's my motion.
Do I have a second on the motion? Second by Dave. Any discussion? Say that. All in favor? All opposed? 5-1.
Was the one, I'm sorry.
Yes, that was rough.
All right, everybody, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We kept everybody up.
All right, what's next? It's past my bedtime. All right, subdivision. Highview Estates, definitive subdivision. I think we have something here that tells us what Highview Estates. Is this just kind of a review as to where they stand, or what?
They're requesting to come in at our next board meeting.
Okay.
To go over a proposal that would amend what the court decision came up with. So they want to propose to the board a reduction in the roadway reduction of the lot sizes, and they'll be ready to come in and give us a presentation at the next meeting.
Okay.
All right, we don't need to vote on it then, right? We just need to them to
Bring
show
them
up
all.
when they want to show up.
Their attorney did forward to us a letter stating that they are, they're included in the extension of subdivision approval by the state.
Sure.
We're aware of that.
Okay. They seem to think that March 26th is our next meeting, though, so
Yeah.
maybe if,
We already informed them.
okay.
Yeah.
Great. All right.
Up next for discussion, of which I'll suggest there'll be no discussion. It's the procedural rules governing the planning board. So we have a copy of it all.
We can read it.
I'm guessing Karen did this for us?
John did.
John did it?
Did it.
Oh, my,
I
excuse
just
me.
printed it. He did it.
Sorry.
What is it?
Oh, you.
Oh,
you
yeah,
did
I found
You
it.
changed it and
Yep, this is
put our
the,
corrections in and,
yeah.
okay. So this is a copy of what we would possibly go with corrections being made. Please take it home. Read it.
Okay.
And then if you have any suggestions, anything that you don't like, any changes or anything else like that, bring them to the next meeting. If you don't, then at the next meeting, we will vote on whether or not to adopt this. Yes, Jim?
You're not gonna read it tonight?
I'm not reading it tonight.
Okay.
Absolutely not. I've already read it, so you haven't read it.
Yeah, but you didn't read it for the TV.
No, oh, no, I didn't read it for the TV, and I'm not about to. I already have a popsicle headache. Planning board department updates. John?
Nothing really at this time, other than.
Excellent,
what we
thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
We love you.
Done.
The blessings upon you.
All right, we get draft minutes from February 11th.
Motion to approve as submitted.
Second.
Motion by Claudia to approve the February 11th draft minutes, second by Dave. All those in favor? All those opposed? 6-0 carries. And, Mr. Director, is there anything else?
No, other than our next meeting will be the second Tuesday in April.
Excellent. I
Okay.
would make a motion to adjourn at 9:49.
Second.
Motion by Claudia to adjourn at 9:49, seconded by Rob. All those in favor? All those opposed? 6-0 carries. Thank you very much. Good job.